are going to, I don't think I need to do an introduction since we just spent a lot of time watching me fumble around with my technology, but I am Lori Flad from Achieving the Dream, and really happy to be with you for this second part of our training today. We are going to do, we've already had a little update from Jenny. I'm going to do a little level setting. We're going to talk a little bit about recognizing and mitigating bias in advising, approaching guided self-placement from an asset base as we work with students. And then we're going to end our time today talking about communication and collaboration. So just so you know how this agenda sort of came about, as we wrapped up last time, we talked about some of the things that we we're looking to keep our eye on with advising for a guided self-placement model, and we'll get there in just a second. But also, I went back yesterday and listened again to our first session together, just so I could hear the questions that were asked. And I just wanted to make sure that this session was responsive to the questions and the comments that I heard in the last session. And so that last piece, our last section on communication and collaboration, even though it's more, it's related to equity, not directly, but more indirectly related to equity. There were a lot of questions and comments about collaborating with faculty and communication. So I wanted to make sure that we address that today as well. And I have some examples that I wanted to share with you. So, so I just wanted to let you know sort of how we got to that, to this agenda. And if anybody has any questions while we are rolling, you can feel free to just drop them in the chat. And I'm really glad to have everybody with us today. So you know who I am, so we're going to skip that. So let's talk a little bit about what we talked about last time. So we last met in, I think it was August. Is that right, Jenny? I think it was August of last year.
Actually, October. We had the
October.
first.
Okay,
yes.
October of last year. Okay, so that wasn't as long ago as I thought. We talked a lot about these principles last time. And so a lot of, and I'm not going to go through them again, but I just wanted to let you know that what we're going to go over today is actually going to address these principles and hopefully will help you with the implementation of some or parts of these principles on your campuses. And so I also wanted to share with you this model this visual, and we looked at this last time, and this comes from a June 2022 study. And I feel like this is a helpful visual. Maybe this could help you if you need to explain this to folks in your departments or your divisions about what guided self-placement is or informed self-placement is, and comparing it to a traditional placement model. So in this graph, it gives you, and it compares the institutional guidance for different methods of placement as well as student choice. So you see the institutional guidance along the x-axis, and it increases as you go to the right, and you see the student choice in each of these placement models, and it goes, student choice increases as you go up along the vertical axis. And so, as you look at this, it's really these placement models are really a continuum. But guided self-placement, it has the maximum amount of, if it's implemented correctly, right? It has the maximum amount of institutional guidance, and it also has the maximum amount of student choice. So it sort of sits in that upper right quadrant where it requires quite a bit of institutional support, but also has the most agency for students, gives the students the most agency in the process. And so, colleges may fall in different places. You might fall maybe somewhere on a line somewhere between, we said that it was sort of a continuum. But I did just want to go ahead and re-emphasize that, a directed self-placement or a guided self-placement model is one where there is quite a bit of institutional guidance, which means that responsibility will probably fall to faculty and staff or those who work to get students placed, whoever that might be on your campus. But it also requires us to be able to help students make that choice, because ultimately the choice belongs to them. It's also important that we consider this model, if it's implemented properly, as one that can give students more choice, as we said earlier, and hopefully create a more equitable process of of placement compared to the traditional model of placement. So, we talked about this last time, sort of helping to make the case for a guided self-placement model, right? Giving the students more agency, giving them more information so they can help make the decision about where they place. I think we discussed last time, and I think we all agreed that, traditional placement model is really more of it's more institution centered as opposed to being student centered, right? And what it does is it makes it easy for us at an institution to take a lot of students and place them in math and English by using a standardized test. It requires, if we go back to this picture here, traditional placement requires very little institutional guidance once you get the testing and the cut scores set up. And it also, involves very little student choice, right? So you place a certain, with a certain number, you get placed into the class. There's no conversation. It's very efficient for the college, right? So this efficiency mindset has led to this placement model. It often leads to underplacement. We are finding that it's not a really equitable process for getting students through their college level math and English. Guided placement, as we said already, gives students more agency in the process. So it does make it more student centered. It allows us to work with students, build relationships with students, to really understand them better, to understand the key information that's going to help them be successful, right? And that's hopefully all part of the conversation that happens as an advisor or a faculty member or whoever is working with the student as they make the decision about placement. Hopefully that's part of the conversation that's going on with the student, because students do hold key information about their ability to be successful. We don't often ask for it when it comes to placement of math and English, but they do often have key information that we don't have. And if it's equitable, hopefully it's also more socially just and gets students where they need to be, and also into and through our programs in a more timely fashion. Did I go too far? No, I didn't. Okay. The next picture came from our last presentation together. This actually these recommendations from the field came from Phase 2 Advisory's position or paper that they put together with Strong Start to Finish. And so the recommendations here, I like them for a number of reasons for this presentation. First of all, I feel like they do align well with the principles that Michigan has put out as recommended for implementing guided self-placement. I also feel like these are, and I think we talked about this last time, these are high level enough that, these aren't very prescriptive. So you can take these recommendations and design and implement in a way that works best for your institution, because guided self-placement will look different on different campuses. And I'm guessing across the state, it looks different at different campuses. And I think that's okay, right? You have to make your model work with what you have available to you, right? So I do, like I said, I like these recommendations because they're high level, but we're going to talk about a lot of things today. We're going to call back to these recommendations a number of times. We're going to talk about what we have to do in order for us to trust students, but also for students to trust us, right? So we have to build that relationship. We're going to talk a little bit about how advisors might get trained and the kinds of training they might need, connecting placement with support. And the article mentions that it's not just academic support, although the academic supports are super important, but also the student supports, right? The student level, maybe what we call non-academic or their basic needs supports. So that's important too. We're going to talk about that and how we can create a model of validation around both academic and student supports. And then this communication piece is really important. We're going to spend some time later at the end of our time today talking about communicating. And then the last, this is where we sort of ended our time together last time, is thinking about some of the equity considerations. And we said that we would come back to these today during our session, our 2.0 session. And so, we will talk about some of these today as we think about equity and opening up these conversations, the role that bias might play, both in the policies that we have at our institutions, and also the biases that faculty and student affairs staff that can make their way into our practices that can influence self-placement, guided self-placement. We'll mention today power dynamic and how it can influence a student's choice. Power dynamic has different implications depending on the students that you're dealing with. And then we'll talk a bit about some of the sociocultural biases and how those play out, sometimes show up in our offices as lack of confidence or lack in the belief in their ability to students to be successful based on, the messages that they have received over, a lifetime of learning. So just wanted to sort of level set us to launch us into our session today. It's been a while since we talked, so I wanted to also open it up for a quick poll. You can either drop your answers in the chat, or you can unmute your mic, but we're curious where you are on your journey with this guided self-placement. And if you'd like to just pop it in the chat, or I'm going to open up my chat window so I can see it, and let me know how you're doing with this guided self-placement journey. As you're putting things in the chat, I know last time in progress could use a refresh. Okay, Amy, that's helpful. I know that we had colleges in different places when we talked last time, right? We had some that were making progress with English, not much started with math. Okay, so Jennifer said you're working with math faculty to create guidelines and processes. That's amazing. So I'm really glad to hear that. In progress, great, thanks. And I guess if you think about the in progress, evaluating our processes related to guided self-placement for 23-24, I guess if you could give it like a thumbs up or a thumbs down, I'm curious, like as you think about in progress, is it going well? I think slow and well is okay. Beginning stages and well is okay, right? Or is it are you encountering certain barriers? Just curious where you are. The faculty are in a reflection and assessment mode. Excellent for the companion course. I see some thumbs up, good. Thumbs up. Have eliminated most transitional studies courses. English is now all correct. Good, math is almost there. Ready to rip off the Band-Aid, but scared about the ripples. Understand that. Yes, and I do understand there's ripples in advising too. Ready for implementation, Colleen at Kellogg. Concerned for the heavy lift for our advising department. Understandable. And I see. Excellent. Thank you for sharing the updates and the progress. I really do appreciate that. Well, hopefully some of the things that we talk about today will not add to the anxiety about the role that advisors play. Hopefully it will alleviate some of that. But if it does not, please feel free to reach out and we can talk more about it. Okay, anything else anybody want to add before I move on? Thank you again for all of your comments. I get the students, the Success Center newsletter, so I get to keep up with the work that you guys are doing. So, okay, so I'm going to move us along. So our first section today is talking a little bit about bias as a barrier in advising. And so as we begin to talk about bias, I think it's worth mentioning the importance of the advisor, and I'm going to say advisor right now because I'm making the assumption as it is with lots of institutions, that the advisor is one of the first touch points for students as they come in and have these placement conversations. But really, this could be the importance of faculty. If faculty are having those conversations, we talked last time and somebody mentioned, making sure that your enrollment and your recruiter people that are out in the field are also well versed in speaking about this. But I think as we talk about the perspective of the advisor, right, they are one of the first people on campus to have these in-depth conversations about placement with students. This actually comes from a presentation that I think was given to the Community College Association by Dawn Coleman in 2020. And one of the questions that she asked was, what are the biases of those folks that are guiding the guided self-placement process? And do they have a deficit perspective? And like I said, this can apply to faculty, student affairs staff, anybody that's working with students on guided self-placement. And then in that presentation, she talked about some of the factors that influenced students' decisions when it came to making choices about placement. And the most important factor in students deciding to enroll in developmental English instead of college level was the oh, great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Jenny. Was the advisor's recommendation. So what the advisor recommends is really important to students. The other thing that was mentioned in that presentation is, as we spread the responsibility for ensuring students are well informed about their choices, right? As we open up these conversations, and we also create opportunities for people to assert their influence on those choices. And so, if you think about a traditional model of placement, these conversations didn't happen. Were not happening, right? So as you open up and inform the students in different ways, right, that gives the participants the opportunity to influence students in those choices. Another example that was in that study was that the counselor perspectives on the quality of the area high schools influenced how they responded when students challenged their placement. So that was actually influencing how they responded to students who were challenging their placement, right? So we have to think about the types of things that may be influencing how we see, judge, talk to students, help them, the ways that we help them, and bias comes into play there, right? And then the other thing, the last piece, that some students felt pressured by their advisor to take the developmental course, so it wasn't really self-paced. That pressure can come from a number of places. It could be that, it could be behavior of the advisor, but it also could be, that I've had conversations, I actually had an interesting conversation with an adult learner, and they were talking about their advising, or their placement and advising journey. And they said that, they're an international student. They said from their culture, they were not to question authority. So when the advisor recommended something to them, they took it and they didn't really question it. And they said they didn't even realize that they could have that conversation, right? So I think how we set that up with guided self-placement makes it more likely that students will be well informed, and hopefully they make good choices for themselves when it comes to placement. Okay, here we go. And so as we think about, we're going to talk a little bit, a little bit more about bias. And so I just wanted to provide a definition from the Oxford Dictionary. I just went online and found it at the Oxford Dictionary. Bias in general, in a general term, is prejudice in favor or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, and usually in a way that is considered to be unfair. So it contributes to unfairness against one group or person or thing. We also talk about implicit bias. Sometimes this is also called unconscious bias. And it is thought to be shaped by experience and based on learned association. So it's experience and learned association between particular qualities and categories, including race and gender or gender. And this is, when we talk about unconscious or implicit bias, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it in a minute, but individuals' perceptions and behaviors can be influenced by the biases, the implicit biases that they hold, right? Even if they're unaware of it, of such biases. And so we understand that implicit bias may be in direct contradiction to what a person's espoused beliefs are, right? But the fact that they have unconscious or implicit bias could impact how they act and behave towards students. And then this quote actually comes out of a 2020 blog from June of 20, not last summer, June of 2020. And I feel like it highlights when we talk about implicit bias is that, you know, I like this quote that it highlights that all of us, no matter how anti-racist, anti-homophobic, or anti-transphobic we may be or think we may be, we continue to support systems of privilege without always knowing that we are doing so. Sometimes we do know, and sometimes we don't know. And we believe that one way to counter this is to be more mindful. And that's really, you know, as we talk about what our lens is going to be today, I think that mindful lens is really important as we, when we talk about our biases, and if they're being enacted, we need to make sure we do not allow them to impact the way we interact with our students. And so I think that I asked you to do, I sent a link for the Harvard implicit bias, the IAT, and that's one way to be aware, right, of our biases. But I think that the last bit on this slide, when we talk about implicit bias, you know, we talk about systemic systems of oppression. And I think I agree with this quote. Real systemic change happens when we recognize that we are, in fact, the system. We all play a role, whether we realize it or not. And real change happens when those of us who make up the system change it. So we must start with ourselves. That can be something on a very personal and individual level. That can be something on a bigger level if you have the positional power to do that. But real systemic change happens when we do the work. And so there are different types of unconscious bias or implicit bias. These are just a few that we see. So affinity bias is exemplified when someone shows a preference or a feeling connected to somebody similar to them. And there's actually, I'm going to ask you to do a quick activity in a minute to see what you know about different kinds of biases. This will be something that you'll do on your own. But I did want to just mention that there are different types of unconscious or implicit bias. And I then wanted to bring this back up. So again, these are the recommendations for guided self-placement in the field. And I wanted to ask, as we think about these recommendations and we think about bias, where does bias get in the way of us implementing and being successful with these recommendations with guided self-placement? And you can go ahead and either unmute your mic or drop it in the chat. Where does bias get in the way? Even if we just look at these 4 things, where does it get in the way? Christopher, false expectations about what the students can and cannot do. Agreed. I think that can get in the way with both placement and support. It can get in the way with trust as we work to build trust with trusting students and having students trust us as well. It can absolutely get in the way there. Any other thoughts on that? Oh, somebody unmuting, or am I just hearing feedback?
Lori, I keep coming back to as I ponder your question is the journey that I took to get where I'm at, or the experiences that I've had in my life. I can sometimes see or not see what's in front of me.
Mhm.
based on that lens. And I feel like sometimes that trips me up in my work some days.
Thanks, Pam. Thanks for sharing that. I see strength, style, and communication. Got it. Communication ability can be a barrier. Pam, do you want to speak a little bit more on that? I'd love to hear more about that.
I think when a student or even the person working with them, depending what their role is, can really create barriers is the best thing I can come up with in getting through bias and whatnot. So if you have somebody that you're working with, or they've been told by an instructor what they should or shouldn't do, how well they communicate, even letting us know as counselors in my role that communication was done. So just communication itself can be the cause of bias or break down bias, and we can't count on the efficacy or the strength of that communication, even if asking open-ended questions. Sometimes it's very difficult to sift through that.
Okay, thanks, Pam. I think that, we're going to talk a little bit about communication in a little bit. And I think communication is often a barrier because we don't, as from an institution perspective, I would say we don't often communicate for our students' understanding. We sort of speak in our own language, and we don't really communicate for the students' understanding. I really think that can create barriers as well. Amy, thank you for your comment. I do agree that bias can be felt, seen, and heard, even if we don't know we have it. And the person on the receiving end can sense it, which can diminish the relationship and trust. I appreciate that. It does absolutely impact trust. Perception of faculty, given their authority of power. Yeah. They're reluctant to communicate because of these biases. Yeah, I think that power differential, Jelena, I hope I said that right. I hope I didn't say it incorrectly. I think that power differential is real, and it also poses a barrier, keeps students from telling what they know, speaking up, maybe sharing important pieces of their story. I feel like there's, I've always felt that there's lots of really important pieces of the student's story that a lot of times get lost, maybe because we don't ask the right questions, we don't ask them the right way, right? We don't approach it with, in a way that makes the student trust us enough to tell us those pieces of their story. So I think that I do appreciate that comment. Students may not believe in the guided self-placement results. We may agree via bias. John, could you speak to that just a little bit? You don't have to if you don't want to.
Yeah, no worries. So some of the initial feedback that I've seen from institutions that have had this or not is that, the student gets the results back after completing the, self-guided assessment, whatever that looks like, and they may not feel confident or they may not believe in it. And our role should not be upon, the other side of that is that on first view, there may or may not be bias in that, meaning we just, okay, that works. And, we go on versus maybe either digging deeper, working with the student, or even pushing them a little bit based on the results. So I think that may be a little deeper impact.
Yeah.
But that might be, I've heard the words perception used as well.
Yeah, great. That's helpful. Thanks, John. Thanks for clarifying that. So this has all been, and I appreciate the responses. If anybody else wants to jump in, please feel free to put it in the chat. But so I asked you to, and if you didn't take a look at the link for the Harvard Implicit Bias Test or the IAT, that is totally fine. If you did, I'm not going to ask you to share your results. So I just want nobody to feel like I'm going to suddenly call on them with this, asking them about their test. This was strictly for your purpose. And I'm going to tell you, there is some why can't I think of the word? There's papers out there, right? There's some evidence out there that says that, that says that this is not a perfect tool. It's not predictive of behavior, and it may not be very effective at actually changing much when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, or justice. So it's like, okay, Lori, well, why did you ask us to do it then if it's, if it's not necessarily the most reliable test? And so, I think that what is useful or what is valuable for our purposes today is this self-awareness piece. It is hard to do the work if we talk about knowing our students to make their experience better. We can't make ourselves better if we don't understand ourselves. So I feel like these types of tests at least get us thinking about the types of biases that we might hold that could get in the way of us being effective with our students. And so that is why I asked you to take a look at that today. So I'm just going to take a minute to do this because I'm running just a little bit behind already and we have lots to do. But so I will tell you, just to give you an example. So I took 2 of those IAT tests. I took the gender and science and I took the gender and career test. The gender and science one reveals if there's a link between liberal arts and female, sort of making that automatic association between them, and science and males. I took that. I had no association, right? So I didn't tend towards, assigning things that were more liberal artsy to females and more sciencey to males. I also took the gender and career, which links female and families, tests that association and also the association between career and males. And it's interesting. So that completely transparently, that test that I took, I showed a low level association between females and family. And so I got thinking, I was like, well, okay, I wonder why that is, right? So now I don't know if I've mentioned this to this group, but my education training, I have a master's degree in molecular biology. I'm actually a genetic engineer by training up through my master's degree. So I have a lot of science education. So it didn't surprise me that the gender science, I've had lots of education and experience that has shown me that women, science is not a limitation for them, right? And women can do all kinds of sciencey things, right? For lack of a better term. But it's interesting. I also grew up in a very traditional home. So my mom stayed home. I had 3 siblings. My dad had, multiple jobs, so my mom could stay home. And in my life, and my old boss used to call it my 9 blocks, right? In my life, I didn't see a lot of females have non-traditional roles. Almost all the females that I saw had traditional roles. They were mothers, they were teachers. My doctors were all male, my nurses were all females, right? So I saw very traditional roles when it came to career. So that made me think, oh, okay, that's probably why, when I took that association test, it came out the way it did. Now, does that mean that if I'm advising students that I'm going to tell females that they need to not pursue a career? No, of course, that's not what that means, but it does mean that I should probably keep that in mind as I'm thinking or doing career advising with students and with women students, to make sure that nothing that I say limits their hopes, dreams, and aspirations. So I did just want to share my experience with that. If you took the bias test and just reflect on what you saw, right? The results that you got, and I think sometimes being aware is really, I will say this. Actually, I'm going to go back to that for just one more minute. These tests, even though it's implicit or unconscious bias, does not let us off the hook when it comes to biases, right? We still are responsible for our behaviors. And so we still need to be aware enough, self-aware enough, to make sure that we are not letting it get in the way of how we interact with our students. We are not letting it influence the types of advice that we give to students, especially around placement. So, and any type of career and academic support. Okay, so I wanted to share just I've got a couple slides on strategies to tackle bias. These actually come from the Dana Center. And as we look at these, I think they're relatively intuitive, but I think it's worth mentioning. We should focus on the individual, right? We focus on the individual student as opposed to social groups or categories when we're talking. Consider the student's strengths, right? We're going to talk about taking an asset-based approach towards math and English. Listening to their words, right? To the words that they are saying. Have you ever had, my kids used to say this to me, listen to the words that I am saying, right? So listen to their words, take notes, process your thoughts, right? And check for your biases. And then with students, communicate honestly and effectively. They know, they can sense it from a mile away if you are not being authentic with them. So make sure that you are communicating honestly and effectively. I think helping students create a plan based on their aspirations and abilities is really important. That shows them that you heard them, right? And that allows them to know that you valued what their input was into that conversation. And that is something that as you move forward, that plan moves forward with their hopes and dreams and aspirations and goals in there. Encouraging students to start and complete their gateway courses in their first semester, in their first year. We just know that's good practice to get them early momentum through to completion. And then also just flexibility, right? Knowing when to advise students onto a different path based on changes in their interest and needs, right? So this is all student-based, and we need to keep in mind the role that we play in any kind of influence on their decisions. This also comes out of the Dana Center. So as we think about removing bias, keep in mind that to be biased is to be human. Again, it doesn't let us off the hook, but accepting it and asking questions like, am I aware of my biases and their impact on my practices or the impact they could have on my practices? Am I taking steps and a systematic approach to managing that? And am I implementing strategies that allow me every time I work with a student to be as helpful as I possibly can with them? And then some tips that they give, some of these are easier than others. I know depending on your resources that you have, take a mental reset before each student. So you approach each student fresh. I think that can be hard, right? Especially with the way some advising centers run. But if it's possible to give yourself, a mental reset, so you don't get mentally exhausted, that allows you to be a little bit more self-aware. Really understanding how your student or how your institution stands on diversity and inclusion and being aware of your climate. If trainings are offered, staying up to date, right? Sometimes those trainings can be uncomfortable, but making sure that you are going to those trainings to work on your strategies for your practices. And we've already talked about, being a good listener and getting to know your students and their stories, and then being aware of your emotional intelligence quotient. That's another good training. If you have not done that, that's a good training to help you deal with others around you and how you process information. So I also recommend that. Okay. So I have an activity for you. I am going to give you 5 minutes. And I'm going to ask you to match the bias. So on the left side, we have the names of different types of biases. And on the right side with the numbers, we have the descriptions. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes. And I'm going to ask you to just pull out something to write with and something to write on. You're not going to be scored. You don't have to say what your score is. You don't have to turn it in. I just want you to take a look at this and sort of think through some of these. And when you are done, if you would just sort of give me a thumbs up in the chat, that would be great. And that way I'll know if we're done a little early. We'll stop a little early. Okay, so go ahead and get started. Show you what the answers are. Let's see how you did. This was actually meant to be a little bit challenging. So I'll give you a couple minutes to just take a look at it. And these probably can be called different things as well. You may have heard them called by different things. There's a couple points to this activity. First of all, it's just to make us aware of the different ways, the number of ways that we can influence our students based on the mindsets and the biases that we hold, right? And this can come from, having conversations with them and helping them make decisions. This can come from, how we work. Some of this, as I looked at some of these biases, I'm like, oh, that would make it, having somebody that holds that bias, even if they don't realize it, might make it hard to work with them as I'm implementing a new model, right? So so that was a few of the reasons. And then, I think sometimes we have a narrow view of what we mean by bias. And I think that there's lots of ways that our mindsets can impact how we influence our students. Did anybody get them all right? Did I not give you enough time for that? No? Jenny says no. Close?
I need a study partner. I need to go to the support center to assist with these. Thank you so
Beverly,
much.
I'll be your study partner anytime.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point. Not enough time to Google. That's right. That was the whole point as well. So this is what I'm going to ask you to do. So now that you have the correct match, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to put you in breakout rooms for about 10 minutes, right? And I'm going to ask you to do this. So I'm going to ask you to choose, and since we're a little short on time, let's just choose 2 instead of 3. So choose 2 types of biases from the list. And for each type, I want you to think about this. I want you to think about, have you seen this type of bias manifest in anyone's advising practice? It doesn't have to be your own. Let's not name names, right? But have you seen this type of bias manifested in anybody's advising practice? If not, what might it look like if it was to manifest itself in an advising practice? And then thinking about the impact of it, right? How could it impact equitable placement of students as we think about guided self-placement? It probably could, impact other areas too. I'm thinking of like getting them connected to supports and career advising and things like that as well. But let's just keep it focused on placement for right now. And then how might you mitigate for that type of bias? So I gave you an example here on this, and I can share this slide with you when you go into the breakout rooms. So the example is I rely heavily on the local high school that students come from when I consider how to advise for placement. And actually I hear that quite a bit in the community that I live in, depending on where the students come from. There's sort of this assumption made about what they might know or the kind of education they had based on where they went to high school. And that's actually an example of, would be an example of an anchoring bias, right? I'm sort of weighting one piece of information more heavily than the others as it guides me in my process of working with students, right? So that's how anchoring bias can manifest itself. And this would cause me to not take as seriously other pieces of data that are coming in about the student, because there certainly is more information coming in that could help me learn more and advise better, right? And it could also keep me from having an equitable conversation. So that's an example. So I will go ahead. Would it help to have the slide that I put in your room? Would it help to have the biases with the correct answers, or would it help to have the activity with the questions? Actually, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this. I'm going to put, oh, I did it wrong. I'm going to put this questions in the chat. Let me do that. Let's see if I can. No, I can't do. I'll have to stop sharing to do that. I'll put the questions in the chat, and then I'll share the slide into your breakout rooms with the different types of biases. So let me stop sharing. There we go. All right, this is what I'm going to do. I should have brought someone from my team to do tech for me. Okay, so here are the questions. I'm just going to drop these in chat so everybody can see them before I put you in the breakout rooms. Okay, so there you go. And now, Jenny, can I do I can do breakout rooms. Let's see. I'm going to do 6 breakout rooms. Let's see how that looks. There we go. Looks perfect. I'm going to open up the rooms and you can go into your breakout rooms. And as soon as you get in there, I will share the slide that has the biases all matched up. So you should be able to see you've all been invited to join your breakout rooms. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to. Is everybody able to find their, yep, looks like most people have found their breakout rooms. Good. Now I just need to go back to my breakout rooms. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Let me go back and put that where I want it to be. I figured it out.
This is great, Laurie. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. All right, let me see if that's going to work. Okay. So we have a few people that haven't joined breakout rooms. Do you need some help getting to where you need to be?
Full disclosure, I am listening because I have to get stuff done. So I'm listening with one ear and I would be a horrible team member. So I am
Fair enough.
typing away and learning about biases, and I figured I wouldn't drag my group down. But I'm very much enjoying the conversation so far.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Jennifer. I completely understand.
Yeah, sorry, full disclosure.
No problem. I completely get it.
Uh-oh. Laurie, can you put the questions in the chat again?
I can, but they won't be able to see them
That's what
in the break.
I was going to copy them because they can't see them in their breakout room, in room 2.
Really?
Yeah, and I did
Hmm.
check. They didn't seem to be there, but
Can you see it now?
I can see it now.
Okay. I wonder
Right.
why. Usually if you hit it before they go in,
I know.
they
I
can
don't,
still see it.
maybe she went too soon. I don't, okay, let me see if I can copy it.
And Jenny, remind me, for our roundtable sessions, anybody can come to those, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Back to room 2 to,
Okay. Well, I'm going to check some of the other rooms and see if they have the questions too. Did that help, Jenny?
yes.
Okay.
I just dropped them in the chat in the room. I don't know why that room didn't have them.
Okay, I was going to pop into another room, but if I leave this room, it stops sharing my screen to all the other rooms. So
Right,
I could-
right.
I
No,
could do
that's
that.
fine. We can just wait. Oh, here's another message. Let's see. Is there another person having a problem? No,
Okay. Good.
no. All good. They must all be able to see it. Or they're not doing the exercise. Always a possibility.
Well, if they're just talking, I'm okay with that too, right?
Yeah.
That networking and connection is just as
Mhm.
valuable. So I'm happy for that as well.
Yes. I'm going to step away for just a second, Lori. I'll be right back.
Welcome back. I think we're just about to get everybody back. Excellent. All right, welcome back, everybody. I think we have all of us. Looks like it. Can you still see my screen okay? It looks to me like it's still sharing okay. Just want to make sure it's still sharing with you guys okay? Okay, super, thank you. So I'd like to ask maybe one or two groups. I know that probably wasn't a lot of time to even maybe do two of them, but I am curious if anybody would like to share if there was any particular kind of bias that they have seen, how it manifests itself and how it could impact a good placement, good equitable placement conversation with students.
Well, in our
I can-
group.
Oh, go ahead.
Amy. No, go ahead, Amy.
Is that Beverly?
It
Yeah.
was.
Oh, that's great, Beverly. I was just gonna say, we had some different perspectives. Why don't you go for it?
No, I'm good. Go
We're
ahead.
so polite, hey? Well, I'll share for our group. It was Beverly Sandbro, Michael Houston, and I in our group. And we all shared different perspectives of when we've either worked with students directly in advising roles, or when we think about this from an administrative perspective, or even in different occupations, how bias can really show up and make it sometimes difficult to connect with the student potentially if they can perceive it. And we're not aware of it, how important it is for us to continually be learning about our own bias. So we might think we know them all, and usually we can discover more. And we might not know how it's showing up and how it's landing on other people. Beverly talked a bit about the training that she does with her team on implicit bias and how to be watching for that, and also the difference between how bias might show up or be perceived in a virtual appointment versus an in-person appointment. I thought that was a really interesting point. And so those were some of the ideas. Michael, Beverly, is there anything else you would add?
Nope, I think you did very well. Thank you so much.
Beverly, could you give us a really, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'd love to hear just a little bit about the training that you do put your, the implicit bias, because now I'm wondering if maybe I should just turn it over to you for the rest of the session.
Oh, absolutely not. And I do have a couple of colleagues on here who could probably respond a little bit better in my response, but we have a department of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And as we have been moving toward recognizing the differences in so many different ways that student comes to us as an institution, but also each other, we have that type of training. Our counselors definitely, although they, for the most part, came in with the training, we continue to do additional training in biases and all sorts of differences to help the awareness stay alive. I'm going to call my colleague out, Pam McAuliffe, because she represents so well as one of our chairs of the counseling department and the work that is done college-wide on implicit bias or just diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice training as a whole. Thanks, Pam.
You're welcome. So this training was a number of hours long. It is part of Michigan licensure for counselors requirement renewal. So our DEIJ director and one of our PhD counselors developed and got approved with the program. They've actually presented it in the school districts locally as well, et cetera. So on a regular basis, we are examining how we perceive and how we adjust and how we confront ourselves and raise those expectations of checking ourselves checking each other. And I think in our group, we also talked about, I'm going to digress slightly. We have to recognize the bias around us, even from a student. In our group, we went through a number of these that we have to confront the student coming in with. You know, their bandwagon. I'll use the simplest example. All my friends are taking calculus. I'm going to take calculus too. You know, it's some of that. So not only understanding our own bias and getting the training and the ongoing update, but also being able to recognize it again in other people, not only our colleagues, but our students as well. Did that do it, Bev? I don't know what else you want. I didn't prepare anything for this.
Yeah, I know. We're just putting everybody on the spot today. Sorry about that. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
My internet is a little unstable, so I couldn't show my video.
I appreciate that. Thank you. How about one more group? Want to share a little bit about what you talked about? Even if you didn't answer the questions, that's okay.
Okay, I'll jump in. I was in a group with Pam from Kirtland and Sarah Huber from KVCC. And we talked a little bit about confirmation bias, which is such a natural thing that seems to permeate all of our lives in a number of different ways, that we catch that in our institutions as well. Even coming from administration sometimes, that various people in the institution may persist in carrying forward confirmation biases. And then we also feel that sometimes we suffer from perseverance bias, where we just continue to hang on to beliefs despite having evidence to the contrary, or evidence that maybe challenges what we've believed in the past. So we didn't get into real specific examples of that in advising, but could certainly see where that impacts our institutions.
Yeah, thanks for that, Julie. I completely can see how perseverance bias, right, could show up with when we talk about guided self-placement, right? You might want to hold on to that old placement method, convinced that, you know, that's what your students need, right? Even despite the fact that there may be data that shows you that it's not the best for students, right? So I do see how that can show up, and it can make it difficult both to do the work as a unit, but also to implement the work with students. So I appreciate all the sharing. So I won't put anybody else on the spot, I promise. If there's anything else that you want to share, feel free to drop it in the chat. It is nice for me to be able to hear what you thought about, and that helps me as I deliver this in the future, if there's something I should edit. So we are going to talk a little bit. I don't think we're actually going to have time to do the activity that goes with this, but I may hold that off until the roundtables, which we'll talk about at the end of our session. But I did want to talk a little bit about taking an asset-based perspective as we talk about, starting our conversations with students, and really the attitude and the mindset that we take with them. And an asset-based approach, an asset-based model really acknowledges the gifts and the strengths, and it respects and integrates the knowledge that the students bring with them, that they possess and have developed since birth, right? So this, our students are not empty vessels when they come to us. They have lots of assets and strengths and gifts, right? So, our minoritized first generation English language learners, students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, they are not problems that need to be fixed, right? This is not a deficit mindset. They're not broken people that need to be fixed. I'm curious, as we look at this wheel, right? This sort of asset wheel that I see here, that we see here in these bright colors. I'm curious, and you can just drop it in the chat as we continue talking. How do you go about in your practice better understanding your students from this asset-based perspective? Are there certain questions that you ask? Are there activities that you do? I'm just curious what this looks like, and if you engage in this in your practice, what it looks like. Actually, I will pause for a moment in case anybody really wants to jump in and share. And if I don't hear anybody, then we can just default to the chat. But I did want to see if anybody wanted to jump in and share how this shows up in your practice. No. Okay. That's totally fine. It's late in the day. I completely understand. And so as we can, I wanted to show you a couple other sources of information and models as we think about leading with an asset base. And so the Strong Start to Finish resource that I mentioned earlier with Phase 2 Advisory and Strong Start to Finish, that had, hold on, I thought I saw something in the chat, but maybe not. So that talked about supporting students as being something that was a critical piece of the guided self-placement recommendations. And it talked about supporting students both with academic supports and with student supports. And so, you know, this model, so that these this validation-rich academic and student support systems, these remarks come from a keynote that Laura Rendon gave at the NACADA virtual convening in 2020. So these are, as you look at these, like these are strategies to help build a validation-rich support system for students. And so, you know, from our perspective at ATD and from the team that I've worked with for years, we understand that supporting students holistically, both in and out of the classroom, is a way to support them equitably. But this is additional important context, I think, as we think about validating students as we offer them and provide them access to both academic and personal supports. They are contextualized for COVID. You will, if you take a look at it, you may see that they are contextualized for COVID because, like I said, it came out in 2020, right in the thick of COVID. But I think they're still extremely valid. So she wanted, Laura Rendon wanted us to learn to be validating agents with students. And that involved doing things like conveying caring and support for our students, which I know many of us already do, right? But this helps to create a validating environment for students as we offer them supports, praise their successes, make sure that you encourage them and validate their ability to be successful. You know, somebody mentioned earlier about students having a lack of confidence, right? So make sure that you validate, you know that they can be successful, and these are things that can help them. Be reassuring and remain accessible to students. They will come back to you, right? I mean, and if you're an advisor, you probably see this, right? You probably see many of the same students come back to you, and that's because you create an environment where they feel validated, where they feel like they can trust you, and they trust that you will give them advice and guidance that gets them where they need to go. She also mentions using video, and I think the last two bullets are really more COVID related. But I do think that last bullet, you know, letting students know you're aware of their situation during this difficult time, whether it's still COVID related, you know, there's a lot of trauma that still is lingering from COVID. So this post, I don't know if it's even post, right? COVID time, but also there's other difficult things in students' lives. So letting them know that you are aware and you are there to help them in the way that they want to be helped. I also wanted to share a model that highlights practices that for implementing a culturally responsive advising model. And this approach was actually shared by Dr. Nichelle Bose, and she shared this at the 2020 NASPA virtual convening. And so this was also right sort of in the thick of COVID. But I think that you'll see that some of these better practices in the REACHES model overlaps with some of the other things that we've already talked about. To be asset-based with our students is to value our students' culture, their perspectives, and that's both validating for them and it builds a sense of belonging for students on campus. You know, I have the good fortune to work with Dr. Paul Hernandez at Achieving the Dream, and he is his expertise is on building sense of belonging. That's one of his, he has many expertise, but that's one of his expertise. And, you know, a big part of his work is on being empathetic and being vulnerable with students, right? And how that's how we open the door to a trusting relationship. And so this REACHES model really speaks to that as well. So, you know, REACHES stands for relationships, empathy, advocate, cultural awareness, high expectations, empower, and support. So that's where where the REACHES comes from. But it really grounds the model in relationships. Relationships are foundational and they need to happen as early as possible. We could not agree more with Dr. Bose. That is something that we have seen over the last many years with holistic student supports to really be the secret sauce, right? Building these trusting relationships allow you to connect students to the things that they need in ways that are very successful. Demonstrating empathy, we have talked about that. You know, demonstrating empathy assumes the best for students who may not be reaching out for help. Not all students, even though they need it, reach out for help. That does not mean that they are not motivated. That does not mean that they are lazy. What that means is there's probably something holding them back from reaching out to us for help. It could be cultural, it could be related to just the logistics of their life, right? But we have to assume the best for our students. We are going to ground our approach in empathy. We have to assume the best for our students. And then maybe instead of, if we notice something, maybe we reach out to them, right? The outreach becomes our responsibility. We seek to decrease anxiety to really help the student realize that we are there for them. Advocate involves using our positional power to advocate for students in a system that is not traditionally built for them. Higher education is not traditionally built for a lot of the students that don't succeed in higher ed. Our minoritized students, our first generation students, those types of students, higher ed was not traditionally built for them. So the structures aren't always kind to those types of students, and it doesn't help them, those groups of students, and it doesn't help them be successful. From our position of power at an institution, whether we are frontline staff or whether we're in the upper administration, we all have a role to play. I feel like frontline faculty and student affairs staff hold really key pieces of the student's story that can impact. If you act on them, it can help change processes and structures that make differences in our systems. Increasing your cultural awareness, that involves educating yourself about the students that attend your institution. So who is in your community? Who comes to your institution? Where are they from? Is there a particular group of students? Maybe they come from, maybe they're, I've worked with colleges where they have a large refugee population, for example, in their community. Is that something that I work with colleges, with tribal colleges, right? So how do you increase your cultural awareness so you are dealing and approaching your students with an asset base? It helps to educate yourself. Maintaining high expectations, which shows that you still have belief in your students, even though they might be struggling. Empowering students by asking them how you can help them, right? Giving them the agency to say, this is what I need and how I need it. And then being ready to support them with whatever they need. So I was listening to our session from October, and somebody mentioned that students don't always come to us for help, but when they do, we need to be ready to have these conversations, right? So that involves being well-trained, having our professional learning. And so we are ready to have those conversations when students come to us. So are there any questions? So I did just want to give you a few different models as we think about, they do overlap, right? There's a lot that's in common as we talk about the REACHES model, as we talk about being asset-based. But I'm curious if anybody has any questions that they want to ask about anything that they've seen so far. I am going to show you, we're not going to break out because I need the last 30 minutes of our session together. But I would like you to think about this, and maybe this is something that we carry into the roundtable discussions together, to think about what you already do in advising sessions or in the classroom, if you're faculty, to better understand your students' assets. And then what would it look like to incorporate, either to start new if you don't already do it, or to add additional strengths-based approach into your current system, into your current practices. I'm also curious what kinds of information would help you implement an asset-based approach. What would you want to know about your students, and what would you need to know? And then the challenges. So I'm going to put this activity on hold for right now, but I am, if you come to the roundtables, which I hope everybody does, I have some scenarios for the roundtable, and I also have this asset-based activity that I hope that we'll be able to dig in a little bit deeper and have conversations together. But I did want to ask if anybody had anything that they really wanted to share or questions that they wanted to ask before I go on. Our time together always goes so fast. Don't see anything in the chat. All right, then I'm going to keep us moving. And we are going to talk a bit about, I've got a couple of videos that I'm really excited to show you. We're going to talk about communication and collaboration. And so this came from some of our conversations that we had in our first session. I did want to, I saw that Dawn Coleman was actually here, at least she was earlier. So I do want to thank her and call out the great work that she did before with this, this presentation that she gave before. When we think about communicating clearly to students, there were a couple really great recommendations in that presentation that involved not overly complicating the process, right? So I will say, and I didn't share it with you, but I was going through the website looking at some of my colleges, and I was looking to see how they communicated their placement process to students. And some of it was not pretty, right? It was using our language, it was using jargony language, it wasn't clear to students. It was, so I really appreciate the recommendation to avoid overcomplicating the process, being clear and simple. And I really like the, you know, in quotes, the language in quotes. It's very simple, right? Avoiding jargon. You know, sort of walking that line and the tension between providing enough information about the courses without overwhelming students, having simple assessments. I do also like the recommendation to keep them a self-assessment and not turning them into a new form of placement, right? If you are hardline scoring these self-assessments and using that, then you are trending away from a self-assessment and more towards a placement, right? So don't swap one placement tool for another, especially if it's, you know, taking the place of that conversation, which leads to the next bullet of making sure that students have plenty of opportunities to talk with advisors and faculty. Again, these don't have to be mandated, right? And I think we mentioned this last time. You can make these types of conversations mandatory, and many colleges do. And I think that's fine as long as you have the resources to manage all of your students requiring an appointment with an advisor or a faculty member to make the decision. If you don't have those resources, then making it mandatory creates a barrier, right? Because then students are going to have to wait, and they may be in a hurry, because we know sometimes students wait till the last minute. So I do think that, you know, strongly encouraging creating those opportunities for students to talk with advisors and faculty. I'm sort of putting it right in front of them, so they have no choice. It's sort of inescapable. Maybe it happens in the classroom, right? Maybe it happens in a place when you gather the students up, but creating those opportunities. And then when the student makes the decision, you know, really respecting their choice. Now, we did talk last time as well. Someone, you know, we were mentioning one of the examples that I shared. One of the colleges, if a student felt, you know, was really, they made a choice, they went into a particular math or English class, but within the first week realized that either they needed the support class or they needed a different class, they could change theirs. So there was some flexibility built in there. I think that provides a little bit of a safety net as students are navigating this decision process, if they can possibly switch if they need to. So that way they can still keep the progress going, even if they have to switch their decision. We also, both, I had a conversation with someone, his name is escaping me right now because I'm trying to think of it, at Houston Community College. And we were talking about communication there and how they communicate their placement model to students and how they train their staff and their faculty. And one of the things that he mentioned was having a single channel of communication to keep everybody on the same page, and that was key. And so that's something when we think about communicating within the college community, that's a really important piece of strategy, right? Making sure that everybody's on the same page when it comes to placement. And there's not different bits of information, some of them that may not be always accurate coming from different sources. It's messaging to advisors, faculty, and other student affairs staff about the intent of using guided self-placement and respecting student autonomy, I think is a good recommendation. That why, right, understanding the why of this move, I think is really important. So making sure that, everybody's on the same page as to why the college is making this move, why it's good for students, and what the plan is. I think also, when we think about key student affairs staff, I think that, I think of folks that are out in the high schools and your recruitment staff and folks that are doing enrollment events, right? Also having everybody, those folks on the same page is really important. They don't need to necessarily know all the details, but making sure that they're aware of, the why and why it's important for students to either talk to an advisor to make that decision, right? They can sort of get students headed in the right direction. Professional development, it sounds like there's a lot of that going on already, but making sure that it's asset-based and helps with the strengths-based approach to advising. And the other thing that Dr. Desmond Lewis, that's his name, at Houston Community College, they have a collaborative professional learning course that's informed by faculty and student affairs staff. Now, it's not informed by students, but I do think sometimes giving students the right to take a look and give you some feedback is not a bad idea. But if you were interested in looking at what their professional learning course looks like, you can go to, I think it's hcc.com, and they have, and I'll give the link to Jenny, but it's on their placement testing, and you can find it at Houston Community College. So I wanted to share with you a couple of examples of a language that I found on the website that described guided self-placement. So we're going to start with Pierce College. So if you look here, so this is language that I found at Pierce College, they're in Washington State, it's student facing, right? It's outwardly facing on their website, talks about why we have math guided self-placement. So I'm just going to give you a minute to take a look at that. And I want you to tell me what strikes you as good about this webpage. Positive language, yes. What else? What else is good about this that strikes you as good? Clearly asset-based, agree. Provide self-agency. Choice-based, yes. Here, I'll give you the next page too. So take a look at this one as well. So this is the second part of their explanation as to what math guided self-placement is. I agree, Erica, it's honest about why they switched to a new process. I think students appreciate that. Tell me what you think of this page. I guess, I'm curious what you think is good, but I'm curious if there's anything that you think could be improved as well. I guess I should have asked that about the last page as well. What do you think about this page? I will tell you just from a user interface, I really like the fact that key links are embedded right in there, which I know that doesn't have anything to do with guided self-placement, right? But I do think that having what students need to look at first or next is available right on this page. Anything else stand out about this page to you? Yeah, that's a good one. Thanks. Yeah, I agree, Julie. Students may not know what GSP stands for. They should actually spell that out on that page. I agree. Provide some scaffolded resources and guides for help to make an informed decision. Don't like that it doesn't suggest conversation with faculty in their areas of study. I agree that may not be an option, right? So I don't know if I'm not as, I would think that's not true, not the case. But I wonder if that was, if that's intentional. But I think that's a good catch. Yeah. So I found something else that I want to share with you. And so this actually is from Highline College. I'm not sure if you have actually seen any of their information or their website at all. But so they have, if you go to their website, they have their 3 math classes. No, I'm sorry, there are 3 English classes. And they have different students describing those classes on the website. So it's in the student's own words and the student's voice. So I'm going to show, hopefully, I think I turned my sound on so you can hear this. So hopefully this will play for you. Let me know if you can't hear it and I can unshare and reshare.
What English course is right for you? What key ideas were emphasized?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear okay? Is that a yes?
In English.
Can you make it a little louder?
The key ideas that was emphasized in 101.
I don't know if I can make it louder. Oh, I think I can. Oh, I think that's as loud as it gets.
Plus extra support was that we had a lot of times to do our class works. We had a lot of class activities that we done. We had more times in the lab, like what extra day in lab, and we have more interaction with the students, and also we rectify each other's mistakes and we learn from that one. It was a very great experience that I have. During the essay, the other thing we learned, this was my first experience, how to write an English essay for American College. So we learned like how to write, how to support your claim, what you're doing, how to hook your audience on your first sentence, and how to convince your audience by providing your logic or personal reasoning, as well as providing with the extra support, quotation from the expert, or outsourcing.
The key thing we learn in this class is it gives you confidence. The main element is to have a confidence. What do you process in your mind to put on paper to write? Then from there, about summary, intro, how you do your intro, nice way, how to summarize somebody's, whatever article you read it. Then from there, you learn how to get hook or thesis. Then that's really help you to focus on topic sentence, From there, then you can make your body paragraph. Also, it's help you to how to organize and how to do the right thing.
So the key ideas that are emphasized in 101 Plus was I learned how to develop and put more into my essay instead of like blank and then yeah.
What is different about English 101 Plus from other English courses?
In English 101 plus extra support and the classes that I took from my own country, it was different that we had a lot of interactions with the students and we were very free to ask questions for clarifications, and there was like more time. There was allow us to have more experience, and it was like a kind of, we didn't feel that we were in a class. It was, the environment was totally different. Like you can ask as many questions. So English is my second language. When I started, it was too hard for me because the time was too short, and the instructor didn't have a lot of time to correct our mistakes and things. So I find it very difficult and hard for me as English as my second language. So a friend of mine who had a similar experience, he had like English 101 plus extra support, and he advised me to take that one. So I dropped English 101 and took the English 101 plus extra support, which is a 10 credit class. And I find it very interesting. This is my like best class ever in American college, so I like it very much.
101 Plus is a wonderful class because it gives you extra time, and again, you learn a lot of things. The other class, they expect you know everything the way they can prepare, but this class, they know they are responsible to help you. That way they give you chance to improve. That's why I like this class better than another 101 or 91 class.
Well, my other English course, I was in an IEP because I had dyslexia. My other course, she was really slow and didn't like help me move on from my fear. And Lisa, I told her about this, and she told me that just do as best you can.
What advice would you give to students to be successful in English 101 Plus?
Yeah, my advice for the students to be successful in the English 101 Plus is that one. I would highly recommend for those students whose English is not their first language, and as well as for the American students as well, to take this English 101 plus extra support. It gives you a lot of time. It really helps you to improve your English writing skills. Like a friend of mine who had just had like placement test, and he took like 81. He qualified for English 101, but I told him you need to take this 10 credit class, English 101 plus extra support.
Oh yeah, visiting tutoring center, and also take your time and do again and again, and sometimes visit a teacher too, extra time, help you to improve. Most is up to you. You have to do hard work.
Do your work. Don't slack off. Don't do what I do because I slack sometimes.
All right. Let's make sure I'm not on mute. Okay, so what did you think? What are your, I have lots of thoughts about this, but I'm curious what are your thoughts about this kind of video?
It's just very compelling. I don't know if there's anything more valuable than a peer's voice or a peer's experience in helping a student make a decision.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Yeah, I agree. Thanks. Thanks, Jelena. Students had a clear understanding of what the course was and the purpose and how it would help them. Great. Did anybody catch, so I found it interesting. So this was the English 101 Plus, which is the support course. And when I listened to the students talk, I heard, instead of hearing something that was deficit and requiring extra support, I heard all the extra things they got by being in the support course. So it was very asset-based. As I was listening, I thought, who better to talk about this course than a student who is in it, right? And finding it valuable. So I found that the student's perspective was very asset-based around the extra support. Anything else? Okay.
I'm curious to know where would you have this video shown? Where does a student access this?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Alicia. So it's right on their website. So you go to their directed self-placement and it talks about the process. And then it has those 3 links to those YouTube videos right there. So students could click on it and they can learn from the students what the different, the 3 different options were for English courses there.
Okay, so right in the assessment location online. Okay, great.
Yep, right on their website. Great question.
And one last question. Just want to make sure I heard it right. Did that one young man say it was a 10 credit class?
He did say it was a 10 credit class. I don't know. Yeah. Yep. And he was excited about it too. So yeah, it was a 10 credit class.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're welcome. So the last bit of content as we close out, I want to talk a little bit just about collaboration. So yeah, 10 credits is intense for sure. So we talked a little bit about this as we finished up our session in October, but really engaging faculty as we think about building a team for guided self-placement is critical for a number of reasons. First of all, faculty understand the content of the courses and what the students can expect. So they are the experts there. They may not completely understand the advising process and what goes on there. So that's where collaboration with the advisors is really important because the advisors are the experts there. So I think together the information and the knowledge and the expertise really aligns well. Having all the student-facing stakeholders on the same page benefits the student. So it's interesting when I had Dr. Lewis record that video for me. One of the things he talked about was having stakeholders on different pages, right? And you had faculty on one side and student affairs staff on the other, and with different information and different thoughts about and thoughts and feelings. And often the student gets stuck in the middle, right? So making sure that we have a unified approach so everybody is on the same page. And so that's why engaging faculty, some of the reasons why engaging faculty is so critical. I have one more video to show you before we close. And this is actually from a math faculty at Cuyamaca College. And she's talking about her perspective and her appreciation for the collaboration that they have with advisors there as they work on a co-requisite model there.
Hi, my name is Tammy Marshall. I am the department chair of math at Cuyamaca College, which is just outside of San Diego, California, just east of it. And I have been asked by Lori to talk just a little bit with you about how we worked with advisors to ensure that students knew what to do and what their best route was with regards to placement, especially with co-requisite supports. So I want to first talk about the fact that there needs to be a partnership between advisors and math faculty. This is essential to the success of any kind of program, whether it's placement, whether it's just the co-requisite supports that you are working on. But this needs to be a partnership between the 2 areas, advising and faculty, math faculty. You need to work on building that alliance between each other or with each other so that together you are coming up with ways to talk with students about the changes that are coming and how they can choose what's best for them, whether there is a self-guided placement or a recommended placement or a hard placement. It is still helping the students understand why they might be placed into a co-requisite or when to choose a co-requisite versus not when to choose or when one isn't necessary. And so one of the first things we did when we started down this road was we went to our advisors and talked with them about what we wanted to do. We showed them the research and we said, this is the road we're embarking on, and we'd like to have you as partners. And sure enough, we were able to work together on not just the creation of everything, because advisors have expertise that we as faculty do not have and math faculty do not have. And they were essential in helping us understand what the student goes through when they're registering for classes and when they're seeing placement. And so it was really important that we have that relationship with them. So when we started talking about what we wanted to do, we really kind of talked together about how we wanted to approach this with the students. And we ended up coming up with our own plan. I think that every college has to come up with what that plan is, how it is that you work together to connect and make sure that you are creating a cohesive partnership and alliance for the students, to help the students. Do not be afraid to talk about data with students. So that was one of the things that we talked a lot about, was when our advisors talk with students, they're going to talk with the students much like I am as a math faculty, because we've created this alliance together on what it is that we share with the students. And so we together created the type of talking points that were needed to help our students. Talking points such as, why are we doing a co-requisite, and what is it that it's for? It is to support the student. What is the student going to learn in a co-requisite, and how is that going to help them succeed in the class? Why might a co-requisite be required for some students and not for others? And share data with the students. Show the students that the data shows and supports what they're doing through this co-requisite. You're going to have students that are afraid. You're going to have students that have friends that started in developmental education, and they're going to want to do the same thing. And it is our job to talk with the students about why that's not a good idea, why it is that we've made these changes so that we no longer offer that developmental education option to students, and instead have the student go right into that college level class with support. Together, we have to have a belief in our students' capacity to do the work. We have to use that asset language, right? Believing in our students, and help them believe in themselves, because sometimes that's part of the problem. And then as you will continue to embark on this journey, you will end up with your own data. And so while we started sharing national data or data from other states, we now share data from our own college. That might not be something you can do right away, but that's something you can eventually do. And students want to see that data. They're not afraid of that. Hi, my name.
So the last slide that I will show you, I wanted to share with you some of the, like an example of the type of data that you could share with students, maybe a little more simple. But this is what Tammy was talking about when she was talking about how you talk to students about why you no longer have developmental courses, right? And so this figure, and I think you guys can see the whole thing, is showing you how if you start with a certain number of students, once students go through multiple levels of developmental education, what you get, the number of students that make it through all of those levels is very small, right? So these multiple levels of developmental coursework don't actually serve students well. This is national data out of the Community College Research Center. But, and what Tammy was talking about is, you know, they started with data like this to say, this is why we don't believe this is a good idea for students, right? And why we're moving to a guided self-placement model. But over time, as you implement these models, you will have your own data and you will be able to say, you know, with certainty, this is better for students. So I just wanted to share this as an example. I'm happy to share the rest of Tammy's video. I wanted to make sure that you heard the data piece, but I know that we are just about out of time. So I wanted to stop sharing, ask if there were any final questions, and turn it over to Jenny to close us out with what's coming next.
Thanks, Lori. This was a great session. There's a lot to digest. I know everyone's looking forward to getting these slides, and I did record this meeting so that we will, and I will share that when we get some editing done, in case you want to catch up or share it with a colleague. And I put in the chat a little while ago, but I'll put it in again, the link to register for the roundtable on May 17th. Still there, yay. Okay. There you go. And with that, it's 5:01, so I will go ahead and again, thank you all for your participation, and thank you, Lori, for a great session.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.